Hi, this is Alan Ledford. I'm the president of MountainStar Sports Group, and this is One-on-One with ADC Partners.
Hi, this is Dave Almy of ADC Partners. I guess you could call this episode's guest, Alan Ledford, a baseball guy. He's been working in the game for over 30 years, beginning as an intern for the Oakland A's in 1983 and rising to the top of the club as the VP of Operations. Since then, Ledford has helped launch multiple minor league baseball teams, most notably the Sacramento River Cats and the Paso Chihuahuas. So a baseball guy, right? Not exactly. You see, Ledford is currently president of MountainStar Sports Group, the owner of the Chihuahuas, but also the USL's El Paso Locomotives and FC Juarez of Liga MX. So the baseball guy is also a soccer guy. What Ledford really is one of the sharpest minds in sports business. Success follows the former minor league baseball executive of the year, and in our discussion, he details some of the things that have helped him and the teams he works for find that success. We also talk about the challenges in launching a new franchise, why he believes baseball will endure, and what it's like to lose a seemingly impossible number of foosball games to yours truly. Enjoy. Okay, Alan Ledford, your first job in sports was with the Oakland A's, right? You went, like, you got in there, you were running the video board, and then you went up and elevated up to the business side of the A's. Eventually, you became the VP of operations for the club. I'm hoping that you can spend just a little bit of time reflecting on your time with the A's. And when you go through that incredible progression of roles throughout an organization, what are some of the things that you and the lessons that you take away from that time with the A's that are still important to you today and how you work?
Oh boy, I tell you, David, there's an amazing number. I could literally talk for the entire time about that. But first and foremost, it was the result. My experience with the A's was the sort of the culmination of naivete and luck. I was naive enough as a young college student to think that such a thing as an internship, which were not that prevalent in that era, with the Oakland A's was a possibility. And having no idea what any of that meant, and was told no right off the bat, rather. And
no pun intended.
No pun intended. And the president of the A sent me a letter back thanking me for my resume, and there was no resume. Two perfect examples of the level of naivete involved.
A smoothly oiled machine, the Oakland A's, even those days.
Exactly. But I was persistent, and through some encouragement from family, a couple months after that initial exchange, and thinking, what's the worst that can happen? I sent another letter. One thing led to another, some additional persistence and a communication with a gentleman, Andy Dolich, who turned out to be a mentor of mine and is still a very good friend and mentor. Andy communicated to me, and I ended up as an intern in the media relations department, and that one-year internship turned into 15 years. And the lessons were plentiful. One is always say yes.
I love that one.
One thing I always communicate to younger folks who are younger than me, which accounts for a good portion of the population.
I wasn't going to say anything, but since you did, that's just about everybody listening to this podcast.
I figured I'd beat you to it. And again, this is, I don't know kind of how this came to me somewhere along the way, but the piece of advice that always served me well, and I still try to apply it today, is think like your boss. So if you were your boss, what would you want you to be doing?
Yeah.
I guess I was able to differentiate myself, and the opportunities were there. And I literally said yes to everything. So my initial role wasn't the video board. It was coordinating all the in-stadium entertainment, because video boards were not prevalent at that time.
I'll bring that up with my fact checkers.
Well, yes. And it was close, but
in the ballpark.
Yeah, in the ballpark. So
it's like the puns are inescapable. You can't get away from them.
Oh, well, around baseball they are.
Yeah, they really are. Anyway,
But in any case, that role provided me exposure to a lot of different departments.
yeah.
I ended up sort of in my early to midlife with the A's, getting involved on the financial side, doing the budgets for the business side, and ultimately was asked to do it for the baseball side and pretty much every other department except the finance side. And through that, I learned a ton. Most people would say, that sounds like the worst, most boring, um, incredibly unappealing role that you could ever have. And I get it. On the other hand, it was probably one of the most valuable ones that I had. I longer story another day, but I learned about the organization and probably knew it front to back at a painful level of detail as well, if not better than anybody. And that broad experience, that sort of general management experience, is our current general manager, Brad Taylor, with the Chihuahuas, says, when asked to describe his job, he said, "I generally manage," which means we need to have a sense of every single function as part of our business.
But there is something to be said for the way that you came up through the organization and getting line of sight into all the different aspects of how a professional sports team operates. That puts you in a position for success in that regard.
There's absolutely no doubt. And let's be real, that was a different era in this business. It's grown significantly. Things are a lot more sophisticated. But you know what? It created an amazing foundation. And I'm a huge believer, regardless of the size of the organization, and even at the major league level, this is an overstatement, but certainly at the minor league level, it's more mom and pop grocery stores. Although we between a soccer, USL soccer team and a AAA baseball team, we employ close to 100 people. So and the money is obviously significantly different than it previously. But learning every function, and the functions are pretty much the same. Those haven't changed. The breadth and the depth has changed. Minor things like the obvious prominence of technology has changed the business like it's changed most businesses today. So I could not have, and again, back to naivete, I could not have asked for or anticipated or have planned for a better scenario than the one that sort of organically, to overuse a word that's overused,
so to speak,
it organically evolved in my experience there. And one thing led to another, and when the aforementioned Andy Dolich departed, I was promoted to his role as the vice president of business operations, which in that era was everything but the finance and the baseball side. And all of the prior experience was invaluable.
Yeah, and it kind of puts you in a position, again, that breadth of knowledge, the rising through the ranks, working at the major league level for this entree into minor league sports, right? So you go from the A's, and obviously there's an interlude where you and I met for the first time at a marketing agency. We're going to skip over all that because there's a variety of reasons why we're going to skip all over that. But you went on to then help launch first the Sacramento River Cats, then now actively playing a role in launching the El Paso Chihuahuas. So two of the most successful minor league franchises in all of baseball. And I'm wondering if there's anything that you can point to as what were the qualities about Sacramento and El Paso, and you take all that knowledge that you had regarding the A's, what made those markets seem so ripe to you? And why did those seem to work so well?
Well, first and foremost, I can't take the credit for identifying those as ripe markets. I was in the right place at the right time with the right experience, which obviously always helps. So maybe back to the luck.
Saying yes.
Component, and there I was. So Sacramento, though I could speak to the attributes of the markets, Sacramento was in need of, it was a different era then, even though they had an NBA team, was in need of things to do. So the quality of life components, and it was a market that was significant in size. Sacramento with state capital of the fifth, sixth largest economy in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and a significant economic engine in that region. So it was a pretty obvious location that Art Savage identified. Art was the individual who became another mentor and wonderful friend. And
Yeah.
Art bought a AAA team with the vision to build a stadium in or near downtown in Sacramento. And Rayleigh Field is what evolved from that vision and that process. And as you certainly know, we were as consultants, we were involved in really the startup of every aspect of the organization from start to finish. And
were there commonalities to what you saw in El Paso when you had the experience of Sacramento? I know that you and I had worked together on things like the Fresno Grizzlies and the Albuquerque Isotopes, and sort of saw all of those. When you saw the opportunity in El Paso, was it a similar, like, oh yeah, this is the River Cats all over again, or were there nuances to that one too?
Yeah, in some ways, I mean, the economic vitality of the region is not nearly the same. Median incomes were significantly below the national average, for example. But the underlying attributes of that market were similar, but totally different, sort of, not just a totally different region, but totally different level of need. So when I first met the Hunt and the Foster families are now owners there, I asked why AAA baseball? You both have significant businesses and other efforts that you're part of that. And when I say significant, that's probably an understatement.
Yeah.
The answer is we want to improve the quality of life and promote economic development in the region through sports and entertainment. And to this day, that remains our objective. And we can talk later about how that all manifested itself.
But there was a clear-eyedness about how they approached it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that was the need that this team and importantly, that venue, downtown first class baseball stadium, was filling. And so, and there were similar situations, but the variables, i.e. income, economic vitality, were different. And so you had to adjust accordingly. I tell you, one of the things that I've learned, David, that with those two projects in particular, and doing some of the consulting projects that we did when I was with the River Cats of Sacramento, we created a separate business unit that did consulting for, as you certainly know, for different teams that were typically in startup mode. And one in Portland that was a whole different scenario. But
right.
One of the things I learned is don't think you know everything simply because you've had success in fill in the blank market.
Right.
And this is an obvious statement, but on the other hand, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that the same principles, the same strategies and tactics that work in market A are going to work in market B. They're all different, and El Paso is significantly different for a lot of reasons than any that I have worked in. One of the favorite attributes of El Paso is that it's an island unto itself, whereas Sacramento, one of the things, even though I'm born and raised in Northern California, I hadn't thought about it this way, but it did dawn on me shortly after our involvement began there, is Sacramento is within 1 day drive of 5 world-class destinations.
Right.
The area, Tahoe and Yosemite and Monterey and wine country, literally.
No shortage of things to do.
No shortage of things to do in El Paso. It's a different geographic location.
Stands more out on its own.
They are exactly out on their own, and you have to go a long ways to find a different thing to do that you can find in the Bay Area just by walking out your front door.
You know what you said about ownership and being clear-eyed about objectives and understanding that market A isn't necessarily like market B. So you can't just templatize the success that you've had, right? You have sort of the basic, again, sort of that broad-based knowledge set that you bring to the table. And what are the unique aspects of that market, and how do you adjust strategy to fit that market? And I know you and we've talked about owners who think, oh, hey, I was super successful in textiles or steel wool or, whatever, computers. I'm going to take that business acumen and lay it over into sports. That's not the same animal.
The best owners are those who understand that the sports business is and I don't want to overstate this, but it's a fairly sophisticated business, getting even more sophisticated by the day, that does in fact have its own set of rules. And simply because you were successful as a housing developer and this is the culture you created and this is the processes, that somehow or another you're going to lay those over, as you put it, onto the whatever team we're talking about. And it does not work that way. Obviously, there are certain principles that apply across the board, whether you're making you own a boot factory or you're refining oil, or
dollars in are good.
Dollars in are good, and fewer expenses going out are even better. But
see, this isn't that hard.
It's really not. It ain't brain surgery, as one of the people I worked for at the A's early on told me often.
Yeah, it ain't rocket surgery, as we like to say in the business. All right, so let's change a little bit. I want to talk about also, because obviously your history is in baseball. You've been in baseball for, I don't know, 40 years or something like that. You found the success of the River Cats. Then you had similar success with the Chihuahuas, built probably one of the most fantastic minor league baseball stadiums in all of baseball, and all of baseball, major league or minor league. Then it was time for soccer, right? And then so, you said, okay, let's take the success with your ownership group about what we've done with the Chihuahuas. And you launched the USL's El Paso Locomotives, which began play in 2018. As a longtime baseball guy, talk about the difference between launching a baseball franchise and a soccer franchise from scratch. What did you learn? What adjustments did you have to make?
Well, if you ever think that you know it all, think again.
Humbling is, I think, the word you're looking for, right?
Well, I think I've had that perspective for a long time. And it is. It's part of the fun of this business to this day, and will always be for me, is the learning. It sounds trite to say, but being around people who are younger. And by the way, it's less than 40 years if anybody's doing the math. So, and I started when I was 8.
Right.
At that point.
You're a prodigy.
I am a prodigy, yes. Just ask me. So, but soccer, and it's been part of the fun, is a totally different beast. I'll use El Paso as an obvious example. Market is 85% Hispanic,
mm-hmm.
Mexican in particular.
Mm-hmm.
That population has a huge affinity for the sport of soccer. So it's a slam dunk, right? The answer is no. It's not, because those individuals are fans, and this is something that has been in place for decades, of Liga MX teams in Mexico and European soccer, primarily because, U.S. soccer on the professional level has, until the last 10 or 15 years, hasn't had the level of exposure and success and call it well-doneness as it does now.
We're gonna trademark that one, right?
Yeah, that's
well-donedness.
Well, you have so you got to get the spelling correct.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough
on these new words. Yeah, that wasn't the case in El Paso, and that was a surprise. We did the research,
right,
and you guys were part of that.
Yeah.
We did the focus groups, and we learned exactly what I just told you. So we knew that we're going to have to take a different approach. So
you weren't just going to open the doors and people were going to walk in. This was going to be an effort.
There was no doubt about that. In addition, everything that we knew and that we learned over our collective experience on the baseball side, it's not necessarily going to work for soccer, and that became clear from the outset. And I think we were not under any preconceived notions that was in fact going to be the case. So those were some of the underlying factors at play here. And then the one thing that I learned beyond that is we have to educate the market about what this is, because USL soccer, even though it's the only second division level, which is very high level of professional soccer in this country, USL is a very young league. So in order to get credibility and communicate the quality level and the experience level of these players, i.e., we actually started in 2019, so we're in our fourth season.
Okay.
Two COVID interrupted or two COVID affected seasons, but nonetheless, our fourth season, we've had on average 10 or 11 players from 10 or 11 countries around the world that have played at extremely high levels. And this is
so pedigree is important.
Well, pedigree is important, but the point is to communicate that to the market, that this isn't your sister's boyfriend's best friend who's a really good soccer player, as a lot of communities have had in the past. This is a whole other level of soccer. It in fact is the world.
So you do sort of draw upon that level of experience from where the players have been previously to sort of build up the understanding and the credibility. We
highlight it most. Yeah. We communicate that, and that's a lengthy process. And we've had, I want to say 4 years, but it's hard to count the COVID interrupted years. It's an ongoing process to continue to educate the market. Number one, about the quality, and two, about the experience, because it's wholly different than baseball. And I don't need to go into the details in that regard, but it's a wholly different experience. And so
that's a much more engaged fan base.
It's much more engaged fan base. They come for different reasons. They're coming for a multitude of reasons on the baseball side. Could be the food, could be the entertainment, it could be to hang out with friends.
With Alan Ledford.
And with Alan Ledford.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the soccer side, you're there to be entertained, certainly. Yep. You don't have to be a huge fan, or you're a big fan and you want to hang out. You're not walking the concourse trying to figure out what you're having for dessert in the third inning or the 30th minute. You're sitting in your seat. The other piece that from the business perspective that was wholly different for us is we're responsible for it all, including the players. Whereas on the baseball side, as you all know, that the major league, minor league business model is that the major league team is responsible for all aspects of the player selection, of the paying the players, managing, deciding who goes where and when, and including the staff. So that managing that aspect is both fun and a huge learning experience, but totally different.
It's a totally new one
than what we experience on the baseball side, where it's all about the business, which is marketing and sales and operations.
And you also, okay, so baseball guy, learning soccer, developing a knowledge base about why people come into this. And then you add another layer of complexity because MountainStar Sports has an interest in FC Juarez, which is right across the Rio Grande, showing off my geography knowledge right there, from El Paso. So in addition to that, what's the learning curve been like being involved with an international soccer club, right? Where do those differences lie?
Again, how much time do you have?
You have 2 minutes to sum up. Give me the bullet points.
To create context, El Paso is part of what is referred to as the borderplex. The borderplex is El Paso, Juarez, and southern New Mexico, primarily Las Cruces. And when we talk about improving the quality of life and promoting economic development from our organizations and ultimately our ownership's perspective, that includes Juarez. And so that community, about 1.25 million people, has had its own significant challenge over the recent years. Things have gotten better, certainly over the course of the last 5, 7, 8 years. But nonetheless, there are plenty of challenges in Mexico generally, but certainly in that region. And this soccer team, this first division, very high level of soccer that the community is provided, is a tool to help improve the image. It's a tool to help communicate to the rest of the country and the world, countries plural, that there's more to Juarez than what you might read in the
paper every day. Yeah,
it's clearly a quality of life element for the residents there. So that is the foundation. In terms of the business side, it's a foreign country, right? And
right.
Just like we talked earlier, don't pretend that what works in one community is going to work in another, regardless of the level of success in the first venue, this is even more of the differential is more significant on the Mexican side versus the U.S. So learning how to do business in Mexico, like learning the soccer business, as we just discussed on the USL side, coming to understand that and learn about how the business is done there, and then finding the best way, frankly, to meld best practices from the U.S. side, where relative to the rest of the world, sports management is far more advanced, and that you hear that all the time about European soccer games. So, that's the process that we're in the midst of, is to continue to help build that organization, the infrastructure around it, the literal infrastructure, meaning training complex, and a new stadium, which is critical to its long-term success, and then managing the financial side as well. And it's a different business model than what we have, say, in minor league baseball, because there's a big piece of national media dollars, television primarily, that are at stake here, as opposed to just being an event-related business. But the event income is significant, and we have a lot of work to do to maximize that piece.
Well, I mean, it kind of brings up an interesting question, right? So you've got this pretty fascinating perspective of, obviously long-standing history in baseball, particularly minor leagues, USL soccer success there. You've got the international soccer piece that you're working with there. With all this experience, and obviously Liga MX is its own animal, but what do you think people misunderstand about minor league sports when they think about it in the continuum of all the different professional sports that there are in the U.S.? What are the opportunities and challenges that you think are particularly present in minor league sports?
I think one of the real misnomers is the use of minor.
Yeah.
And of course, in popular culture, there are movies and stories that really work to the game's advantage, generally speaking, in terms of creating an aura around it, and the sort of Americana piece and small, mid-sized communities throughout the country. And USL soccer is in bigger communities, larger communities, typically, although there's some smaller ones. But there's nothing minor league about the business anymore, because the dollars are much more significant. It's frankly much more professionally run than it has been in the past, and the people who run these teams are more sophisticated in terms of their experiences. There's always opportunity when that's not the case, right? And frankly, my experience has been we were involved as in a different kind of relationship with the turnaround situation, right, a number of years ago in minor league baseball, and fixing something that's not where it should be is great fun. Making something better is great fun, and there's always going to be that upside, and that's one of the allures of minor league baseball in particular, and USL soccer, is creativity is a big part of the success, as long as the creativity is applied in the appropriate way. And by that
I know there's subtext there, and I don't even want to touch it.
Well, no, well, there's a lot of different directions to go, but what I'm referring to is not being creative for creative's sake, where you pat yourselves on the back and say, "Oh, how clever was that?" But if it's not generating business, if it's not driving revenue, if it's not selling tickets, if it's not creating a deeper relationship with the community, if it's not creating sponsorable opportunities or called PRable opportunities, then you're wasting your time. And then, of course, the piece of this puzzle that has become much more significant in our business, it's one of the benefits of doing a startup, is you can create anything you want, is analytics and data on the business side. And that's one of the things that I was excited to do in El Paso, was to hire somebody specifically for that role. And I don't know if we were the first. I wasn't aware of any others amongst what at that time were, I think, 160 teams, but there were less than a handful, if there were, that had the benefit of approaching things that way. Now it's even more common, and that's only we're in our ninth season. So that's only a little over 9 years ago.
What do you think would surprise people the most about sitting in your chair, running a sports franchise? Like, what's the perception and what do you think is the reality?
I think this applies to sports and probably entertainment generally. Is from the outside looking in, it's really sexy, right? It's a lot of fun. It's where people go to have fun. So naturally, that's the perception. And it is. I mean, there's no doubt it's a lot of fun. I don't know how sexy it is, but it's a lot of fun. And it's, entertaining people, doing something good for a community is really, it all has its own rewards that are fairly unique to our business. What people don't necessarily understand, and they don't have to, it's not their issue, is it's a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
And there is we laugh at the question of what do you all do during the off season? Well, just like a retail store that's dependent on the holiday season for their ultimate success, in order to have that holiday season, you just don't turn the light switch on October 1st and people come flooding.
Watch them come in.
Exactly. We don't turn the light switch on opening day and turn it off on Fan Appreciation Day and expect that it all will come back the next opening day. So if we're doing it right, we talk about this all the time internally. If we're doing it right, we're working harder in the off season than we are during the season.
Well, and you brought it up earlier in this conversation. The dollars involved here are far more significant than they have been at any point in professional sports. This isn't just this nice, quiet, family-run operation anymore. There are big dollars behind it and a high expectation behind those dollars.
And the deal for stadiums are, these AAA ballparks now are in the neighborhood of $100 million. A USL championship stadium is, you can build them for 50 to 100 million, depending upon size and the level of amenity, et cetera. So yeah, they're big money. There's real estate tied to them as well, and in some cases, real estate development opportunities that didn't exist previously. In virtually all ways, except for, and I'm talking about the baseball side, and on the soccer side, we do control the player side. It's tantamount to a major league team, just on a smaller scale.
Man. And with all the requisite action and responses and responsibilities that go along with that.
And I'll differentiate it on one level, though. I think this is for especially some younger people who might be bored enough to be listening to us.
We have a huge 25 and under following.
Exactly, there's no doubt. One of the real appeals of the minor league business, for me, and I've been in a unique position that I've had significant experience on both sides, is that you get involved in every aspect of the business. If you're not directly involved, you have a line of sight to it. And in my opinion, if you operate without silos, you consciously eliminate those. You create a culture of collaboration, which is incredibly important because that's the business we're in. And I will guarantee you, myself and our other senior folks do not have the corner on the right answers or the good ideas, and it's part of the fun, but you have to create that culture. I think you see less of that on the major league side. It's just harder to create because you are almost by definition in the silo, given the size of those organizations now and the resources involved and just simply the scope of need and responsibilities. People don't have the proverbial bandwidth. So
yeah, you're smaller, you can pivot more quickly, you can adapt more. There's a more entrepreneurial mindset. You said it, if we can be creative and try different things to be able to show how to be able to drive new revenue for the clubs that might not have been even considered at a major league level.
And this goes full circle back to something else you asked about, Dave, you touched on, and that's ownership. Because at the end of the day, with all due respect to me and others in my position and my colleagues, it all starts with ownership and helping to create that culture in terms of the vision that they set and in terms of the support they provide. And certainly not just financial support, by supporting the decisions and not being obstructionist from the standpoint of having all the answers because you obviously were super successful in another business and come to the realization because you read the sports page every day that you have all the answers.
It's basically a textbook.
Yeah, exactly. So Uh, I've been reading it since I was a kid.
Yeah, I know everything there is to know about sports because I can compute what Juarez.
Right. Well, real quickly, what I appreciate about, and I have been blessed with for 95% of my career with ownership that gets it on all levels. What the best owners do, probably because they're coming from a different perspective, is they pressure test. They ask great questions, and I like that. And
Yeah.
it makes you look at things differently. Seeing things from a different perspective. I talk about this often in our circumstance. We are too close to everything that we do. Everybody, the people who matter, our fans, our clients, they have real lives. They're not there with blinders on, focus on our business, and that's what we do, rightly so. But whenever we can get input from those outside of our little bubble, intelligent, experienced input, it's really valuable.
Make sure you have your T's crossed and I's dotted.
Well, that's always good too.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, you started with the A's in 1982, right? Correct?
Correct.
All right. So that's it's a long time in baseball. And in that time, there has been a lot of ink spilled about the demise of baseball, right? The sport is dying. It's not relevant anymore. Doesn't resonate with younger people. I mean, I even went back and looked. I mean, there have been articles since the 20s about why baseball is about to die. I mean, what's your perspective on this? Why will baseball endure? And are changes required? Does the sport need to make changes to increase its relevancy?
Yes and yes. Baseball is absolutely going to endure, and I'll touch on that in a second. But like with anything, change is key. You have to evolve, you have to adjust accordingly. And one of the reasons that baseball is in the situation that they're in, i.e., that there are as many challenges, is because I think we've been slower to change than we should have. And that's natural for an institution that's more than a century old, that has had amazing success, that is attached to the fabric of this country, and appropriately so.
Mm-hmm.
A good friend of mine, a former colleague, comments often that our strengths are our weaknesses, and that fabric and the place that baseball plays in this country has been a huge strength and part of its success. But the makeup of the country is changing. They're evolving. The expectations are changing. The level of competition is changing, and we better change. And that specifically goes to attracting younger fans. And that's not a perceptive insight on my part, obviously. That's something that baseball has been talking about for some time. And that is absolutely key. And part of doing that is changing the way the game is played. And by that, I mean changing some rules.
Mm-hmm.
See that happening now. We're experimenting with a number of rule changes at the minor league level that will eventually, probably sooner than later, land at the major league level. From all these things have been talked about, from pitch clocks. Games are too damn long, and I don't care how old you are, but I think everybody would agree with that. They want to move things along. They want to create more action, but at the same time, that's back to our strengths or our weaknesses. One of the strengths of baseball is there's so much strategy that is part of the game. There are so many things going on simultaneously, and it's one of the real appeals.
Intricate.
It is probably more intricate than most any other sport, at least from the perception of the average fan. But at the same time, that might contribute to its slowness.
Mm-hmm. But you feel strongly it's going to endure.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you see the money that's been being invested by some very smart people, including television networks, including the largest digital companies in the world, in the sport. People want to be entertained. Baseball will always have a significant place to play. And I for one, hope that it's playing one of the primary roles in filling that need on a going forward basis.
All right. So last question, well, almost last question, as you'll find out in a minute. MountainStar owns top performing minor league baseball club. It's got a top performing USL club. What's next?
There are other opportunities out there throughout the world, and we're in a position, fortunately, to look at those and entertain them. And I would not be surprised if at some point or another that something in that realm, who knows what or where, were to come to fruition. And it's exciting to be able to leverage the experience that we have from our ownership, myself, our other executive management in these kind of opportunities, and obviously with new colleagues to entertain new challenges. And I suspect that something will come to fruition at some point.
I mean, okay, so that was the longest way around saying something's going to happen somewhere on the planet Earth related to sports, potentially in the future, potentially with some other people. So
that's the politically correct answer.
That was some very nicely done. That was saying a lot without saying anything. All right, but that's actually a good hint. We got
the point is yes, we're looking at and open to other opportunities outside of the Borderplex El Paso market, and who knows? We'll see.
I hope you're open and prepared for this next opportunity, Alan Ledford, which we call the lightning round. These are a bunch of questions that I have not briefed you on, that you are going to answer as quickly and as thoughtfully as possible. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do this thing then. You've been in baseball a long time. I don't know if it's 40 years, I don't know if it's 35 years or whatever, but how many times in your career do you figure you've watched dot racing or a variation of dot racing?
Well, first of all, apparently the lightning round doesn't include lightning questions, but in any case...
No. This is my round, Ledford. Answer the questions.
Oh, my gosh. 1,000.
1,000. It's got to be more than that. That's terrible. Terrible answer. What rule change for baseball would you immediately institute?
The pitch clock.
Okay. You're a baseball guy who's now deep into soccer. Explain the offsides rule.
Yeah, don't do it.
Okay. You you also love Round Table Pizza. Please provide a short review of their breadsticks.
Oh my God, there's no way you can give a lightning round answer to that.
It's just too much goodness.
Joey, the goodness is not even describable.
Okay, very good. All right, so we're moving on to the next one. You actually commute from your home in the Bay Area to El Paso. What's your pro tip for flying Southwest Airlines?
Experience. The more you get, the more.
So your pro tip is to fly more?
No. Let's start again on that one.
The lightning round catches another one. You'll have to wait for that. Okay.
I didn't expect to be criticized by the host.
Lastly, what does it feel like to be on a 50-game plus losing streak to me in foosball?
Well, some of us work, some of us don't.
I've worked quite hard beating you regularly in foosball.
That happened in our past life. I must acknowledge.
Alan Ledford, president of MountainStar Sports Group. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for listening to this ADC Partners podcast. For more information about ADC Partners, please visit our website at adcpartners.com.